Well, thank you very much to Tom and Nelson for inviting me to be part of this Geoshare workshop. In many regards, it's an ideal situation for economists when they say, come and tell us what you want, and the price is going to be zero. Okay, so as was alluded to in the introduction, we're looking from an end user perspective. So I'm someone who would be looking around for perhaps data on yields or land cover data and want to find it pretty quickly without learning any new software. So background about, I guess, the program I come from. Ron had trouble pronouncing it. There's a real mouthful, the Joint Program on the Science and Policy of Global Change. Unfortunately, the acronym doesn't flow off the tongue easily either. So sometimes it's just called the Joint Program, or the Gateway Program if you want to call it that. And we are funded through, well, we're based at MIT, but we're on what's known as soft funding, so we closely follow where the funding opportunities are. It is a true interdisciplinary program that includes economists like myself and climate scientists, reflecting, I guess, the tradition of focusing on energy and economics and then interaction with the natural system. We don't have any agronomists at the moment, but we do have an increasing focus on agriculture. And our modelling framework is built up of a series of models that can be run independently or as an integrated system. So our core human behaviour or economic model is the emissions prediction and policy analysis model the EPA model. And in the Earth system, we break it down to an atmosphere model, CAM, a model of the ocean, the community land model, and TEM. So we have a lot of land cover data go into parameterising those models. There is also a move where we want to identify more crops in CLM. So when you look at what we would like, I think that list is heavily influenced by the researchers working on that with their wish list of things they would like to improve or compare outputs from the community land model with a greater resolution of crops in there. Okay, so we do have some capability to look at the geospatial data, mainly on the climate science side, but we also have some economists that play around with econometrics based on geospatial data as well. So we have some capability, but Geoshare, the Geoshare framework that I saw yesterday would make it a lot easier for us in terms of getting access to the data. There'll be hopefully more data that is available for validation or calibrating models as well. So although we do have the capabilities, we would still benefit greatly from the interface that I've seen with Geoshare. And also thinking of our needs, we're seeing an increasing number of requests and funding opportunities for agricultural focused research. The big oil companies are very interested in bioenergy, and I mentioned during one of the breakout groups yesterday, these guys usually have pretty deep pockets. And I think the likes of what Nelson presented yesterday showing yields, if you had some bioenergy crops in there, that would be very relevant to them. So that may be a source of funding as well. And as well as the bioenergy, we're seeing an interest from large food companies wanting to know what the changing climate is going to mean for them in terms of meeting growing food demand under a range of changing conditions, which we want to do this what-if analysis in our modelling framework, but we also need some more data to do that. So that's our background. So before coming here, I sat down with everyone who was working on something related to agriculture and came up what I've called a wish list here. So I realise it may appear quite demanding, but as I said before, the price is zero, so why not just keep going back for more? So maybe this list we could prioritise it, see what the costs of some of these items are in terms of looking at future directions for what to include, to possibly include in Geoshare. So I think the food crops up there for this community, it's probably not a problem. These are several were covered in what's already available on Geoshare, but I think for the food crops there's a lot out there. The energy crops, having worked quite closely on trying to put a lot more bioenergy details into our economic model, it's very hard to try and find out in a global model broken down to 16 regions what is the potential yields in those regions for these bioenergy crops that we're not really growing at the moment. So it's where the crop modelling community could make some valuable inputs, well for us anyway, available. As I said before, I think that'd be very interesting for the big oil companies as well. And as I said, they have deep pockets and may fund some of that. So look at the dimensionality with the crops that we are at least immediately interested in. And then what we'd like, and the other dimension, the aspects we would like. Again, some of these have been included, ideally at a 0.5 degree grid or finer. Again, going back to the zero price for us anyway. And so I can just run through this list. It's quite a clunky sort of way to present it. So yield, production, irrigation, fertilizer use, pesticide use, pest census, growing season, and planting and harvesting dates, crop rotation, land rents, field boundary shape files, soil characteristics, historical and projected land cover change, climate observations and projections used in AgMIP. So thanks very much for Nelson's presentations yesterday. Population density and the canopy height or stand age of various biomass. So that's our laundry list, I guess, of things that we would like, realising that they do have maybe not have a cost to us for this, but they have a cost to the community, so they may need to be prioritised in terms of what are the most pressing issues, and also look at the cost side. You know, what is sort of available now that could be put into Geoshare. Okay, and so also from our point of view, a broader point than going down to the details of what exactly we'd like included. If we have improved accessibility and are validated or respected by the community database, that helps us a lot in terms of if we're working for a government grant or for an industrial sponsor, and we can say, well, here's the data set we're using, and you can go and view it easily as well. So it helps us in that regard. We can obviously get improved model outcomes if we improve the data. Credibility and traceability I touched on before. And also we do, from time to time, do some research for government agencies and congressional testimonies. So we're heavily involved in the Waxman-Markey bill, for example, when that was going through the Senate. So we're doing a lot of analysis, and the output was being used in those discussions. So obviously traceability and accessibility is important in that regard. And I've got as the last one on here, which is maybe branching out a little bit beyond Geoshare into some crop model parameters, but as we saw yesterday, a lot of this data is model output, so it'd be great to know some of the key parameters behind that. I think our team working on refining CLM Ag to the CLM model to include more crops would be interested in these parameters as well. So they have an immediate need for this, so this may be driven by this as well. If we can get crop model parameters on crop phenology and plant physiology, if they could be publicly available somewhere on the database, that would be great. And just as we discussed this, a lot of the people I spoke with our program, this was their first sort of introduction to Geoshare, and they weren't from the economic side, so they weren't familiar with the GTAP model as well, and some questions immediately came to their mind. Neither I think are a large problem. Version control, I guess, is obvious, or it seemed obvious to me from yesterday that it's easily to track through, and the versions will be catalogued, and you can go back to the version that you want. The concern here was that if you submit a paper, and by the time it gets back to a journal, by the time reviewers are finished with it, there's a new version of the model on the web, and you need to go back and maybe replicate your results or change it. But I assume that's not going to be a problem. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And this is how well integrated we are with the climate scientists. It was the climate scientists here who were coming up with saying, well, what's the incentive to put your data on here? So it wasn't from the economic side. So they were thinking about, well, sure, we may get citations, as Nelson said yesterday, but there's a concern that if you have a database that is built on a series of databases submitted through Geoshare, you might have a very long list to cite, which may be infeasible. So will condensed citations be provided? And if there is a condensed citation that's building on contributions from a lot of people, where is the incentive for the individual there? So I don't know if there is some additional tracking that maybe could be put in there to say Smith 2010, which is built on 100 different authors. You could include that, well, we've had so many citations to Smith 2010, we can track it back, and at least the individual contributors can put it in their CVs and their promotion applications, etc. Okay, so I think I'm near enough to the time limit to call that a close.